Hey there, and welcome to Family Revenge. We're so glad you're here. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you can stay with us for every twist and turn. Let's jump right in. I hadn't been back in over a year. My project with the tech company overseas had kept me busy, and I'd barely had time to think about home. But when I landed back in town, it was like nothing had changed, except everything had. The house looked the same white shutters, same crooked mailbox, same cracked sidewalk leading up to the front door. But as I stood on the porch, something felt off. It was too quiet. I rang the doorbell, then knocked. Twice. No response. My parents should have been home. My dad had promised to be back from his business trip a few days ago. Mom? She was supposed to be here. I waited another minute, my hand still hovering over the doorbell. Nothing. I pulled the old key from my bag. It was the same one I used to sneak out late as a teenager, the one my mom gave me when I went off to college. My stomach turned as I turned it in the lock. The door creaked open. I stepped inside. The house was silent, too still, like it hadn't been lived in for weeks. Everything was exactly where it should have been. The same framed family photos on the walls, the same half-empty glass of water by the couch, the same throw blanket draped across the armrest. But it didn't feel lived in. "Mom?" I called out. No answer. I stepped further in, calling her name again. Still nothing. I walked toward the living room, my heart pounding harder now. That's when I saw her, my mom lying in the middle of the floor on the same couch she'd always sat on. But this time, she was pale, her face slack, eyes closed, not moving. I knelt beside her. She was alive, but barely. Her breathing was shallow, almost imperceptible. She looked so fragile. Where was Dad? Where was anyone? I grabbed my phone and searched for a recent post. The top post from my dad was tagged # vacation mode. He was at some fancy resort, posting pictures of pristine beaches and expensive cocktails. No mention of my mother. A wave of anger hit me like a punch in the stomach. This was not what I had come home to. This was not what I expected. I ran my fingers through my mom's hair, trying to comfort her, but it felt like I was the one who needed comforting. I checked the time. She hadn't moved since I got there. I had to do something. I stood there, still on the floor beside my mother, my fingers shaking as I pulled out my phone. I needed answers, something to explain what the hell was going on. I opened the medical app I used to access her health records. The timestamp on the entry was from 3 days ago. 3 days of her being semi-conscious, barely holding on, and not a single update from the hospital or her doctors. No one had come to check on her in all that time. I scrolled down, heart hammering in my chest. There was no mention of family involvement, no calls, no notes from Dad or Ryan, nothing. Just the cold, sterile reports on her health that made it clear she wasn't getting any better. I moved to the next page, looking for something. Anything that might explain her state. I was grasping at straws, desperate to find a reason for what felt like abandonment. But there wasn't one. There were no fresh flowers by her bed, no sign of anyone trying to make her comfortable. The water jug beside her, empty. The room smelled stale, like she'd been alone for far too long. "Mom," I whispered, brushing some hair from her face. Her skin felt clammy and too cold. The way she was lying there, so still, it was like she had been left to fade away. I stood up, pacing the room, angry at my own helplessness. Dad had promised, he'd always promised that family came first, that no matter what, he'd be there when things went wrong. But here I was, home from across the world, and he wasn't. He wasn't here for her. He wasn't here for me. I could feel the weight of his absence in my bones. I ran my hand along the back of the couch, looking for some sign, some hint that he'd been here recently, but there was nothing, not even a damn note. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I couldn't keep spiraling. I needed to act, to figure out what the hell I was going to do. I moved toward the back of the house, where I knew my mom kept a chest full of old family heirlooms. My fingers brushed against the wood, worn smooth from years of use. I opened it slowly, hoping to find something that would make sense of this mess. Beneath an old quilt, I found a letter. Its paper was yellowed with age, the ink smudged but legible. It was from my grandfather, Grandpa Dave. I'd forgotten about this letter, but I'd heard enough stories about him to know what it meant. Grandpa had always been a man of few words, but when he did speak, it was always sharp, always precise. I unfolded it carefully and began to read. It was cold, businesslike, with no sentimentality, just facts. It outlined everything, his will, his expectations. And then right at the end, the words I hadn't expected to read. If your parents fail to fulfill their obligations to care for your mother, as they have done time and again, the inheritance shall pass to you. You are responsible for carrying out the wishes outlined in this document. If they do not appear in time, you shall assume control of the family estate and its assets. You alone will be responsible for what remains of this family. I couldn't breathe. This was it. This was the reason my dad had never mentioned my mother's condition to me. He'd left. He'd chosen to walk away from his obligations. And my grandfather, who I hadn't seen in years, had written me into the plan as the backup, the last line of defense for a family that was falling apart. I felt the weight of those words pressing down on me. The inheritance was mine. If my parents didn't show up, if they didn't act, didn't step up, then everything, all the property, all the money would be mine. But it wasn't about that. It was about what my grandfather wanted me to do, what he trusted me to handle. I folded the letter back up, my hands trembling more than before. My mother, still motionless, was no closer to getting better. She had no one, no family. My dad wasn't coming. And Ryan? My brother hadn't even tried to reach out. I stared at her for a long moment, watching her chest rise and fall in shallow, ragged breaths. The anger I felt before now mixed with something heavier, a decision, a choice. My grandfather's words echoed in my mind. You are responsible for carrying out the wishes outlined in this document. And I had no other choice now. My parents had already abandoned her, and I wasn't going to stand by while they did it. I sat on the edge of the couch, the letter from Grandpa Dave still in my hand, feeling the weight of it settle in my chest. There was no going back now. I could feel the decision tightening around me, suffocating but necessary. If my parents weren't going to show up for her, then it was on me. I stood up abruptly, my pulse quickening as I walked to the kitchen. I grabbed my phone from the counter, staring at the screen. My thumb hovered over Greg Thompson's name. He'd been my grandfather's lawyer for years, knew the family business, and probably knew more about the estate than anyone else alive. I didn't have time to waste. The phone rang once, twice. Then Greg's voice, low and calm, crackled through the line. Jenny, I was wondering when you'd call. Greg, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I need your help. My mom, she's not well. I found out she's been left alone for days, and now I've learned things I wasn't supposed to know. I need to move forward with the will. There was a long pause on the other end of the line, a brief silence that stretched out like a warning. I'm sorry to hear about your mother, Jenny, but your grandfather's wishes, they were clear, he said slowly, like he'd been expecting this. You're the one who'll take control now, if your parents fail to do what they should. If your mother's health has been neglected, it's your responsibility. I felt a surge of emotion, something tight and furious in my chest. What kind of people just leave their mother like this? I snapped before taking a breath. I need to get the paperwork in order. What's the first step? Greg's voice softened. I'll get the ball rolling. You need to have everything in place. Papers signed, everything above board. I'll prepare the documents, but you'll need to be ready to act fast. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. Thanks, Greg. I'll be waiting. I hung up, the reality of it all hitting me harder than I expected. There was no turning back. Not now. Not with my mother lying in that room, practically abandoned. I had a duty, a responsibility, and I was going to see it through. I paced the house, my hands cold and stiff, trying to think. I had to act, but there was one thing left to do. I grabbed my phone again, dialing my father's number. It rang 3 times before his voice came through, smooth, casual, like everything was fine. Jenny, hey, you made it back. How was the trip? He said, his tone far too upbeat. Dad, I cut him off, feeling my stomach twist with the words. Where the hell are you? Mom's been in a semi-conscious state for days, and you're out on some beach posting about your vacation? Do you even care? There was a brief silence, then a low, irritated sigh. Jenny, don't do this. I'm doing what I need to do. Your mom's fine. She'll be fine. Don't give me that bullshit, Dad. She's barely alive, and you're not here. I need you to come home. Now. He didn't say anything for a moment, and I could hear him shifting around on the other end. I'm busy right now. We'll talk when I get back. Relax. Everything's fine. I could feel my jaw tighten, but I forced myself to stay calm. No, it's not fine. You've neglected her for days, and now you're going to pay for it. Don't bother coming back until you fix this. I'm taking over, Dad. The line went silent for several long seconds. Then he spoke, his voice dripping with condescension. You don't know what you're doing, Jenny. Don't get yourself into something you can't handle. I'm not the one who left her to die alone, I shot back, my voice sharper than I intended. If you won't come back to help, I will. I'm doing what needs to be done. Don't call me again until you're ready to face what you've done. I ended the call before he could respond, my hand shaking. I wasn't surprised by his response, always deflecting, always pretending like everything was someone else's fault. But I was done. I had to be. The phone lit up with messages and missed calls almost immediately. Texts from Dad, from Ryan, from random family members asking why I hadn't gotten in touch. They all thought I was overreacting, but I wasn't. I wasn't. I ignored it all. I went to the table, pulled out the documents Greg had sent over, and began reading through them. There was a lot of legal jargon, but the bottom line was clear. The estate, the house, the fortune my grandfather had built, it was all mine now if I chose to take it. If I chose to claim it. The papers felt heavy, like they were loaded with expectation, with consequences. But it wasn't about the money. It was about what my grandfather had trusted me to do, and it was about time I took control. I glanced at my phone one more time, then powered it off. The calls would keep coming, the messages, the pressure, but my decision was made. There was no going back. The days passed. My phone stayed on silent, the constant buzz of missed calls and texts, a reminder of the mess I was in. I hadn't heard from my parents, not even an apology, not even a damn excuse, just silence. The longer I waited, the more disgusted I became. My father's words about everything being fine, about everything being under control, rang in my ears, but they didn't make sense anymore. Nothing he said had ever lined up with reality. He wasn't coming back. He wasn't going to help, and my mom was still lying in that bed, breathing like a ghost. I couldn't wait around any longer. I made arrangements with the hospital to transfer my mother to hospice care. I wasn't sure if it was the right thing to do, but it was the only thing left to do. When I arrived at the hospital, I found myself standing in the same sterile, cold hallways that had become too familiar. The nurses were kind, their faces sympathetic as they prepped my mother for the transition. The paperwork felt endless, but I signed it all. Power of attorney, the consent forms, the release for her transition. And then, when it was done, I stood in the sterile room, watching the machines that had been keeping her alive. Her breaths were faint, too shallow, too weak. I held her hand, feeling the coldness seep through me. She didn't deserve this. No one deserved to be left in this state, neglected and forgotten. The nurse came in quietly, her steps soft, respectful. "Are you ready?" she asked. Her tone was so careful, like she was walking on eggshells. I nodded, my throat tight. It wasn't a decision I'd taken lightly, but I'd known this moment was coming. The nurse disconnected the tubes, and the beeping from the machines slowed, then stopped. My mother was gone. Officially, I didn't feel any better. I didn't feel anything. I just felt numb. I left the hospital without another word, without shedding a single tear. What was there to cry about? My mother had been abandoned, and now, so was I. I came home to find my phone nearly bursting from the messages, texts from Dad, calls from Dad's lawyer, the occasional random family member trying to reach me. They all wanted something. Answers, apologies, some excuse for why I hadn't called back. I deleted the texts without reading them and ignored the calls. But then the phone rang again. This time, it was a private number. I didn't recognize it, but I knew. I knew exactly who it was. "Jenny," my father's voice came through, strained and frustrated. "I don't know what you think you're doing, but you need to stop. This has gone too far." I stood there, leaning against the counter, my hand tight around the phone. "You're right," I said, my voice colder than I intended. "It's gone too far. You've been gone for days, leaving me to deal with everything. You don't get to come in now and tell me what to do." "You're making a huge mistake," he said, his voice rising with anger. "Your mother's been sick, and I'm not going to let you use that against me." I snorted, my grip tightening on the phone. "Are you seriously blaming me right now? You weren't here. You didn't do a damn thing for her. Don't try to turn this around on me, Dad." There was silence for a moment. I could hear his breathing on the other end, sharp and ragged, like he was struggling to keep control. "I'll be back soon. I'll fix this. Just wait for me, okay? We'll figure it out." "No, we won't," I replied, the words coming out flat. "You don't get to walk away from this. I'm not waiting for you to fix anything anymore. You're the one who broke this family, not me." I hung up before he could respond. The anger that had been building in my chest since I walked through that door finally found its release. I wasn't waiting for my parents anymore. I was taking control. I'd signed the paperwork at the hospital. I'd handled everything. I'd arranged for the care that no one else had bothered to do. And now, I was ready to execute Grandpa's will. I was ready to make my own decisions. I knew the consequences. I knew my parents would be furious. They'd never forgive me. But what choice did I have? They'd abandoned us. They'd left us both to rot. I sat down at the desk, opening the legal files Greg had sent me. It was time to get things moving. The family estate, the house, everything Grandpa had left behind, it was mine now, and I was going to take it. I didn't care how much they hated me. I wasn't doing this for them. I was doing it for me. And for my mother, who deserved more than they ever gave her. My fingers flew over the keyboard as I drafted the first set of documents to file. The will was clear. The inheritance was mine. And as much as I hated that it had come to this, I was going to carry out Grandpa's wishes. My phone buzzed again, but I ignored it. The flood of calls and texts didn't matter. What mattered was that I was finally free from the weight of their neglect. I finished drafting the papers, signed them, and made the first call to Greg. "It's done," I said, feeling the weight lift from my shoulders. "Let's get this started." And just like that, the final choice was made. The next morning, I heard the tires crunching on the gravel driveway before the doorbell rang. I hadn't slept a wink the night before, the weight of everything still heavy in my chest. But there was no turning back now. I stood at the front door, arms crossed, as my father pushed his way inside, followed by my mother, who looked tired and frail in her oversized sunglasses, like she was trying to hide from something. "We need to talk, Jenny," my father said, his voice tight, his jaw clenched. I didn't say anything, just stepped aside so they could come in. The tension in the room was palpable, like the air itself was thick with the anger and the resentment that had been building for days, for years. "I don't know what you think you're doing," my father started, his voice rising, "but this is a betrayal. You've gone against everything we've built, everything your mother wanted. You're taking the house, the estate, all of it. And for what? To play some kind of power game? This is our family, Jenny." "Family?" I spat, cutting him off. "What family, Dad? The one that left Mom to rot while you and your precious vacation kept you busy? You didn't even care enough to come home. You didn't even call. And now you're lecturing me about family?" He stepped forward, his face red with fury. "You don't know what you're talking about. You don't understand the pressure we've been under. We've been busy, doing what needs to be done." "You've been vacationing, Dad?" I interrupted, my voice cold, cutting through the noise. "While she was lying here, all alone. Do you really think I didn't notice? Do you think I couldn't see how little you cared? You let her die alone." He froze, his face darkening, a mixture of guilt and rage twisting his features. "Don't you dare." "Don't I dare what?" I shot back, stepping closer. "Don't I dare point out that you failed her? Don't I dare tell you how much you've ignored her health while you had your fun on the beach? You're the one who abandoned this family, not me. I'm doing what needs to be done." His eyes were blazing now, but before he could respond, my mother spoke up, her voice surprisingly sharp, despite her weakened state. "You don't get to speak for your father. You don't know anything about what's been going on." I turned to her, shocked. Her eyes, though dim and tired, locked onto mine. "Mom," I said, the sting of her words cutting through me. "What are you talking about? You think you're doing the right thing, but you're just manipulating the situation. You're playing some game for control, Jenny. All of this is about power. You want to be the one who makes the decisions, who takes everything over." I could feel my heart hammering in my chest as her words hit me, but I couldn't back down. I'd already made my choice. "No, Mom," I said, my voice steady but with a hint of desperation. "I'm not doing this for control. I'm doing this because no one else would. I'm doing this because I care about you. You don't see it, but this is me stepping up for you, for both of you. You were the one who was ignored, not me." She closed her eyes, shaking her head, clearly too tired to argue. But her silence wasn't comforting. It was another weight on my shoulders, a weight I didn't know how to carry anymore. "Dad," I said, turning back to him, "Grandpa's will is clear. I'm the one who takes over now. You didn't show up in time, and now you can't just waltz back in and pretend like you get to fix everything. You don't get to fix anything." My father's face twitched, and I could see the fury, the shame, the helplessness all mixing together. But I didn't care. I wasn't backing down. "You think this is about money?" I pressed, voice rising. "You think I care about that? Number, this is about making sure she gets what she deserves. This is about giving her the care and respect you never gave her." His eyes flickered for just a second. Maybe guilt, maybe fear. I didn't know. But then he steeled himself again. You're making a mistake. You don't know what you're doing. You're going to regret this. I shook my head, a bitter laugh escaping me. Number, I'm not. I've been standing by, waiting for someone to do the right thing, and nobody has. But I'm done waiting. I'm done trying to fix a family that doesn't want to be fixed. My mother's tired voice came again, softer this time, almost a whisper. I'm still your mother, Jenny. Don't forget that. I paused, my chest tightening. I haven't forgotten anything, I said quietly, though my words were hard, cutting. But you've been neglected for far too long. And now I'm the one who's here. Not Dad, not Ryan, me. There was a long silence in the room. My father, red-faced and sputtering with anger, didn't speak again. He didn't need to. I could see the defeat in his eyes now, the realization that this was no longer something he could control. I've made my decision, I said, voice firm. And you won't control this anymore. I turned away from them, leaving the room before either of them could respond, feeling the cold weight of betrayal in the air. My decision was final. I wasn't going back, and neither were they. The calls kept coming. My father, my mother, their lawyer, distant relatives. Everyone had something to say, something to demand. They couldn't accept that I was standing firm. Every time I picked up my phone, there was a new text or voicemail, each one more frantic, more hostile than the last. I ignored them all. Then the letter arrived. It came on a thick, official-looking envelope, the kind that you only see with legal documents. I knew exactly who it was from before I even opened it. My father's lawyer, the same one who'd helped him bury anything that didn't suit him for years. I tore it open and read through the threats, fraud, coercion. They accused me of taking advantage of my mother's illness, of manipulating the situation to seize the family estate. My stomach churned, but I didn't flinch. I wasn't going to let them intimidate me. The letter also included their intention to challenge the will and file for a contested hearing. I wasn't surprised. They'd tried every trick in the book to get their way, and this was just another move in the game they'd been playing for years. I called Greg Thompson as soon as I finished reading it. Greg, I got their letter, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. They're threatening to contest the will. He didn't sound worried, just resigned. Jenny, don't let it shake you. They have no case. It's a stall tactic. Your grandfather's will is airtight, and they know it. They're just trying to buy time, hoping you'll back down. I'm not backing down, I said firmly, though my hands still shook slightly. The pressure of it all was starting to hit me, but I wasn't going to let them see that. You're doing the right thing, Greg reassured me. This is all noise. Let them file their motions. We'll respond accordingly. The will is clear, and their accusations are baseless. I leaned back in the chair, taking a deep breath. The weight of everything was starting to catch up with me, but I kept reminding myself why I was doing this. I wasn't doing it for the estate or the money. I was doing it because my mother deserved better, because this had gone on long enough. After hanging up with Greg, I started making plans for the future. It was the only thing that made sense now, taking all this pain, all this anger, and turning it into something meaningful. I would use the family estate, the resources Grandpa had left me, to create something that would outlast all of this bitterness. I began sketching out ideas for a nonprofit, focused on elder care for people who had no family to support them. There were too many people like my mom, forgotten, neglected, and left to die alone. The first step was getting the legal paperwork in order to start the foundation. It felt like the only way to take control of the situation, to turn the legacy of this house into something that mattered. As I began moving forward, the media picked up on the legal battle. The local news ran a story about the will contest and the family drama. It wasn't long before relatives and even strangers started weighing in, posting comments online, calling me selfish or cruel for taking the estate from my parents. Some called me a hero, but it didn't matter. The judgment, whether positive or negative, kept pouring in. I couldn't help but read some of the messages, but I never responded. It didn't matter what people thought of me. What mattered was what I was doing. The foundation needed to happen. The house needed a purpose beyond the mess my parents had left behind. My phone buzzed again, and I saw the familiar number. Dad, I let it ring. Then another voicemail from him, then another, and then a text full of pleading. Please, Jenny, come to your senses. This is a huge mistake. We're family. Don't destroy everything over this. I didn't even open the message. Another text came through, this one from my mother. You're breaking my heart. Don't make us your enemies. We're still your parents. I stared at the screen for a long moment, the sting of her words cutting deep, but I didn't reply. I couldn't. There was no going back. Not now. Not after everything they'd done, everything they'd failed to do. They wanted to paint me as the villain, but they were the ones who had abandoned my mother. They were the ones who'd left her in that state. The legal battle would continue. I knew it would get worse before it got better. My parents would throw everything they could at me, hoping I'd crack, but I wouldn't. I couldn't. I looked back at the papers on the desk, the legal documents that would eventually give me the power to carry out Grandpa's wishes, the foundation that would ensure no one else had to go through what my mother had. I wasn't about to let anything stop me. This was just the beginning. The day of the hearing arrived, and I wasn't nervous. At least I didn't think I was. But when I walked into that courtroom, the weight of the room hit me in a way I hadn't expected. My father and his lawyer were already sitting at one of the tables, eyes locked on me as I took my seat across from them. My heart beat a little faster, but I kept my face neutral. I wasn't going to show any weakness. Not now. Greg Thompson sat beside me, his calm presence a welcome contrast to the storm of tension swirling in the air. He flipped through the papers in front of him, his focus unwavering. He didn't need to say anything to reassure me. I trusted him. The judge, a stern woman with sharp glasses, called the court to order. Her gaze flickered over the room before settling on me. "Ms. Woods," she said, "you're claiming the inheritance outlined in your grandfather's will. Your parents contest it, citing fraud and coercion. We will begin with your father's lawyer." I nodded, and my father's lawyer, a slick man with a too-shiny suit, stood up. He was ready for a fight. "Your Honor," he began, his voice smooth, rehearsed, "we are here today because Ms. Woods has manipulated her mother's illness to seize control of the family estate. She isolated her mother from the family, convincing her to change her will, and now she is trying to take everything for herself. This is a matter of family betrayal and exploitation." I couldn't stop myself from flinching at his words, but I kept my face as still as possible. He was trying to paint me as the villain, the bad daughter, and I wasn't about to let it work. Greg stood up then, his voice calm and steady, the exact opposite of the lawyer's dramatic performance. "Your Honor, I'll be brief," he said, pulling out a set of documents. "We have irrefutable evidence that Miss Woods did nothing of the sort. First, the medical records. We have proof that Mrs. Woods' condition worsened over the past several days, and there is no evidence of manipulation. In fact, Ms. Woods was the only one to act, arranging the care her mother needed when no one else stepped up." Greg handed the judge a folder with copies of the medical reports, detailing my mother's declining health and the lack of any family involvement. I saw my father flinch as the documents were passed to the judge. "And as for the claim of isolation," Greg continued, "the clear wording of the will speaks for itself. It specifically states that if the parents fail to care for Mrs. Woods, the inheritance would pass to their daughter, Ms. Woods. That's not manipulation. That's following the wishes of a man who understood what it meant to provide for family." He turned to me briefly, his eyes meeting mine with a quiet reassurance before turning back to the judge. "The will is valid, Your Honor, and we are asking that you uphold it." The judge didn't speak for a long moment, and the silence felt heavier than anything I'd ever experienced. I glanced at my father, who looked like he'd just been slapped. His face was pale, his jaw clenched so tight I was sure it was hurting him. He looked like a man who just realized he was losing control, and for the first time in my life, I saw the cracks in his armor. The judge's gaze flicked back and forth between the two of us, before she finally spoke. "I have reviewed all the evidence," she said, her voice as calm as Greg's. "The medical records are clear. The will is valid, and there is no evidence to support the claim of coercion. Ms. Woods is, in fact, the rightful heir and executor of the estate." The words hit me like a freight train. It was official. I had won. My father's face turned crimson. He opened his mouth as if to say something, but no words came out. His lawyer looked like he was about to explode, but no one could stop the judge's ruling. The judge looked at me. "You are now responsible for carrying out the terms of your grandfather's will. Good luck, Ms. Woods." I nodded, barely hearing her as the weight of her words sank in. My heart hammered in my chest, but there was no turning back now. I had taken control, and I wasn't about to let anyone take it away from me. My father stood up, looking as though he might lunge at me, but he didn't. He just turned, his face twisted in rage and humiliation, and walked out of the courtroom without saying another word. His lawyer followed close behind, but I didn't care. It was over. Greg clapped me on the back as I stood, his expression proud but composed. Well done, he said softly, his voice full of approval. The relief that flooded me was almost overwhelming. I had done it. But there was no joy in it. Not yet. This wasn't the victory I had imagined. It was just the beginning. The future still loomed large, and I had a lot of work ahead of me. But as I walked out of that courtroom, my step was a little lighter. The battle was over. I had won. The days after the court ruling were quiet, almost too quiet. The world didn't feel any different, yet it had shifted in ways I couldn't fully comprehend. There was a strange weight in my chest, a mixture of relief and sadness, because while I'd won, I had lost so much more. My parents were gone, not physically, but emotionally. They'd abandoned me long before the court case, and now there was nothing left to patch up. I didn't let that stop me, though. The first thing I did was plan my mother's memorial. I wasn't going to throw some public spectacle like my father wanted, some hollow display of grief for the cameras. No, my mother deserved more than that. I wanted a small, intimate gathering, people who actually cared about her. I invited a handful of close friends from the town, people who had seen her through the years. I also reached out to a few local veterans who had known her when she worked at the VA. They were the ones who truly understood what my mom had given to the world and what she had lost. The day came, and I stood at the front of the small gathering, the cold weight of her absence settling in my chest. I hadn't cried much yet. I'd been too busy fighting for her memory to truly grieve. But now, standing before the people who had respected her, I felt the grief flood in like a wave. I'm not here to tell you about her illness, I started, my voice steady, though thick with emotion. I'm here to tell you about the woman who raised me, the woman who stood by my side when nobody else did. I paused, looking out over the small crowd, each of them nodding, recognizing what I was saying. My mom was never the kind of person who made noise. She wasn't flashy, but she was loyal, and she was strong. She worked harder than anyone I know. And when things got hard, when life wasn't fair, she kept going. She didn't let anyone see how much it hurt. And I think that's the most painful part of all of this, that she kept going for so long, while the people who should have been there for her weren't. The words stung, but they were true. My mother had been a fighter, even in the silence of her own suffering. She deserved so much more than what she'd gotten. When the service ended, I stood by the grave, watching the handful of people leave. Some of them lingered to talk to me, but I didn't want to be distracted by empty words. They hadn't been there for her in the end, but they were here now, and I didn't need them to try to ease my pain with half-hearted apologies. My parents had done more than enough of that. They were still out there, painting me as the villain in the public eye, twisting the narrative to make themselves the victims. I could hear the whispers, read the stories in the local paper, where they spun everything in their favor. They talked about how I had taken the estate, how I had betrayed the family for money. It was all a lie, but they had the resources and the influence to make people believe it. But I didn't care. I focused on what was right. My grandfather had trusted me with this estate, with the legacy of this family, and I wasn't going to let it rot away in the hands of people who couldn't even be bothered to show up for their own mother. I wasn't going to let her memory fade like everything else in this town had faded. I got to work immediately. The first step was rebranding the family estate. I started turning it into the foundation my grandfather had intended all those years ago, focusing on elder care for those who had nobody. My mother's struggles had only reinforced the need for it. So many elderly people had been left alone, neglected by their families, just like her. But this foundation would provide the care, the dignity, and the support that was so often missing. I put every ounce of energy into it. I renovated the old house, turning rooms into meeting spaces for caregivers, building a network to train people who could provide real, hands-on care. I didn't have time for anything else. Not the phone calls from my parents, not the media circus they tried to create. I was too busy making something real, something my mother would have been proud of. One day, as I walked through the nearly finished facility, a sense of peace settled over me. I'd made the right choice. It wasn't about the inheritance or the money. It was about doing something for the people who had no one. It was about honoring my mother's legacy, something my parents would never understand. The calls from my parents still came, but I ignored them all. They were irrelevant now. What mattered was this foundation, this new purpose. I wasn't going to be defined by their betrayal. I was going to build something that would last. And in that, I found a kind of peace, knowing that I had done everything I could to right the wrongs that had been done to my mother. The foundation grew quickly, faster than I had expected. Donations started rolling in from all over. I guess people were hungry for a cause that mattered, one that wasn't tied to the kind of corruption and manipulation I'd seen too much of. We began making a real difference. We had enough resources to provide actual care, not just a promise of it, for elderly people who had no families of their own. I spent more and more time at the family estate, the house I'd inherited. It had always been filled with memories of my childhood, some good, most not. But now it was taking on a new life. The rooms were filled with purpose instead of silence. The hallways, once so empty, echoed with the voices of people who mattered, people who needed the care that my family had neglected. Every time I walked through those doors, I felt a little more like I was doing the right thing, like the estate finally had meaning. A few months after we opened the first wing of the nonprofit, I was invited to speak at a local fundraising event. It wasn't something I had ever imagined myself doing, but it felt right. So I stood in front of a crowd of strangers and friends alike, people who supported the foundation, people who wanted to see real change. The lights dimmed, and I took the microphone, my heart pounding for a second. But then I remembered what this was about, what I had been working for. The anger, the bitterness, it was all gone now, replaced with something stronger. I never thought I'd be standing here today, I began, my voice steady. A few years ago, I was just trying to survive my own family's mess, trying to hold things together when everyone else had walked away. But now, I'm here because I realized something. I realized that there are so many people who get forgotten, who get left behind, just like my mother was. They deserve more than that. They deserve care. They deserve dignity. I paused, looking out over the room. The faces looking back at me were filled with support, hope even. This foundation isn't just about me or my family's estate. It's about making sure no one else has to go through what she went through. No one should die alone, neglected. We are here to change that, and I promise you, we will. There was a round of applause, but I barely heard it. I was lost in my own thoughts, thinking about how far I'd come and how much more needed to be done. I'd come to terms with my family's betrayal. It had hurt. It still did. But their absence had made me stronger. It had made me clearer about my purpose. The press had already caught wind of the foundation's success, and I could see my parents' efforts to paint me as the villain still playing out in the background. A terse message from them landed in my inbox one morning, accusing me of ruining the family legacy and demanding that I return the estate. I stared at the text for a moment, the old temptation to respond flickering in my chest. But then I deleted it. I had nothing left to say to them. They weren't my family anymore, not in any way that mattered. My family was made up of the people who needed care, the people who were forgotten, the people I was actually helping. The rest of it was just noise. I looked out over the crowd again at the event, feeling a sense of peace I hadn't known I could have. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. I had a new legacy now. A legacy built on care, on giving people what my parents never gave my mother. A legacy that would last far beyond anything they could ever take from me. And for the first time in years, I was certain I was doing the right thing.